We're to ask any typical fan of Super Sentai which Super Sentai series they might recommend you watch or which one's their favourite. You can pretty much count on there being one of 4 typical responses, if not any multiples of those 4. And I'd say those 4 typical responses would include Samurai Sentai Shinkenja, Gosei Sentai Dairenja, Juken Sentai Geki Ranger, or Chujin Sentai Jetman. Jetman's the one we're talking about today, and when I first started watching Jetman, I immediately felt like I understood something. I immediately felt like I understood why people liked it. And then after about 6 episodes, I grew very fatigued very quickly. It's not one of those shows that holds itself very well. It doesn't sustain itself very well. After about 15 episodes, you're properly bored. There's only so much that it can do. And the problem with the show is that essentially it hits only a handful of narrative beats. You've got the love quadrangle, I suppose, between the yellow owl, the white swan, the red hawk, and the black condor. 3 of those being men, and then the white swan being female. So he must have been doing something right to have all them chasing it. But I digress. So you've got that little quadrangle thing going on, and that resolves itself around about 35, 40 episodes in, thereabouts. It finally sort of goes, oh, we've had enough of this. And it's also got the bad guys and all their internal conflicts. The bad guys being the Vyram. Whatever a Vyram is, it was sort of not really well explained, at least not to... I felt like it wasn't. They're interdimensional things. One's a robot, one is literally human, one's a little kid, and one's some blue guy, and I never really understood them. Third, you've got just the generic conflict between them, the Jetman fighting the bad guys. Oh, we're gonna destroy you, Jetman. Oh, yeah. And it stagnates very quickly. You've only got really those 3, maybe some others that they threw in there. There was another squadron, there was another leader of the thing, and there was a thing over there, and it wasn't very varied. It was pretty much the same stories over and over again. For example, the amount of times Ryu being the Red Hawk, pining over Ri, who was a girl who died in the opening act of the first episode, or the opening act of Jetman, and was later revealed to be one of the Vyram ministers or leaders or whatever they are, and he's like, I swear to you I will turn you back into a human. Oh, and he's swearing and he's telling you, oh, this is what I'm going to do, and he doesn't... He says it so many times over the 50 episodes, starting at like episode 6 or something ridiculous like that. They just drag it out for 51 episodes. And then you finally get to the end and it's just some big old battle and it's like, oh. And after a while I started to disagree with my assessment of the show. I didn't understand why people liked it. Was it because it was the first one they watched back in 1991? Was that all it was, or was it something else about the show which resonated? And then I finally finished it and I understood why it resonated. I did some reading, I did some research, and I finally took in Jetman as a holistic brand within the Super Sentai series, and I understood. Now here there be spoilers, kids. That's all the warning you're getting. It did air in 1991. There have been subs for quite a while now, so if you are interested in watching it, turn me off, come back later. If you're not so interested, or if you've already seen it, continue watching. But at the end, they sort of, as I sort of expected, because Jetman isn't a show about the Jetman winning. It's a show about the Vyram losing. That's a very important thing to remember. It's about the Vyram auto-destructing because of internal conflicts. It's almost political in nature. It's almost political satire, though I don't think it was that self-aware. One could make an argument for being satirical and judgmental and critical of social governments, but let's not get into that. Let's just go back to what I'm trying to say. Halfway through the last episode, so that's at the mid-break, the only ad break that Jetman had in the 90s. The big bad's beaten, Jetman have won, we come back from the ad break 3 years later. For some absurd reason that I properly don't understand, given that the love triangle quadrangle I mentioned earlier was resolved such that Guy and Kaori were together. But whatever, Ryu and Kaori are getting married. And Guy's running late. So he's trotting off, walking down the street, and some guy wants to mug him. I forget what he wants to steal. I think he's got flowers or a present for the wedding, and he's like, no, not today. And he sort of punches the guy in the gut or the face. I don't know. The guy ends up on the ground. And he pulls out a switchblade. Switchblade. And stabs guy in the chest. Or more to the point, stabs guy in the gut. So Guy stumbles to the wedding, all bleeding, clutched over, sits on a bench. He's missed the service, but he's there for the reception. And Ryu, who, thanks to character development and progress, is his best friend. And he's like, I'm here now. I'm a little bit hungover. Now that's why I did the thing, because that's what Guy did. He did shots of one of those sorts. It was scotch. That was a whiskey, but he did scotch, I believe. And yeah, so Guy's telling him that he's hungover, he's tired, he's not going to be able to party with them. And so Ryu gets up off the bench, goes and parties with his friends and the rest of the Jetman, while Guy stays on the bench, slowly closes his eyes, and fades black. Now we can make the assumption that Guy died because of the wound, and we can make the assumption that his friends sort of went, oh no, well go, take your life, woo woo woo! But it was still ambiguous enough that it was an unknown thing. Was Guy dead? Was he still alive? And having finally seen that, and having watched Gokaiger, I understand why Jetman resonates with people. Like I said, I did a bit of research, and Jetman was the first installment in the Super Sentai series to have the core members of the team refer to each other as names. So, for example, Guy called Ryu while he was wearing the helmet, rather than calling him Red, because the writers and producers finally felt and decided that it would be awkward for an interaction like that to happen in real life. Hey, Black, shut up, Red! Doesn't work, does it? No. So calling each other by their first names was an important change for the Super Sentai series, and it has maintained itself as staple. As an extension of that, they have relationships internal within the team, i.e. the quadrangle, i.e. Ako and Raita, sort of friends, that sort of thing. As well as there being relationships internal with the villains, as well as there being relationships, intra-relationships, as it were, or inter-relationships, interrelationships between the Byram and the Jetman, and sort of all sorts of fantastic things there. Instead of it just being about bad guys versus good guys and being very black and white and bland, there was actually some character development, actually some relationships involved in the show. And I think, in context, if Jetman was the first one to do this, it can't be anything but amazing for the people watching it. So I don't think it was just that his popularity is just about people watching it for the first time, and more to the point, it being their first one. I think it's about it being the first one to do something with the writing beyond going good and bad, boom! But beyond that, I think Guy is important, because on the surface he's the caricature. I'm the Black Ranger, I'm cool, I'm hard-boiled, I'm the ladies' man, I'm the one who is antagonistic towards leader, blah 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 blah. It's very archetypal, it's very default to a Sentai character that we've seen time and time again since then and before then, I'm sure. But beyond that, he was so well humanized and so well characterized that we couldn't help but love the guy. Like, I mean properly, he was an amazing character whom we could actually like. That means something, especially at the time. And the way they finished it with him on the bench and not telling us whether he was dead or alive, denying us closure. People disagree with me sometimes with typical assessment of screenwriting would suggest that to write a good script, there needs to be closure inherently embedded into the final act. Otherwise, audiences don't know how to respond. And because audiences are apparently, in a sense, a bit stupid, they need closure to get on with their lives, because otherwise the film will leave a hole in their gut and they'll feel bad for the rest of their lives. But I disagree with that edict. I disagree with that assessment of screenwriting. I think Jetman, for me, in a strange way, because Jetman is by no means high cinema, but Jetman, I think, exemplifies and characterizes how closure is not requisite to a good story, because it denies this closure, and I think that helps the show to resonate with audiences. More spoilers, it wasn't until 19 years later in an episode of Gokaiger that Guy's death was confirmed in any way. 19 years of not knowing whether your favorite character was dead or alive. I think that commitment to the ambiguity, that I don't want to use the word commitment again, but I'm gonna, that commitment to denying the audience closure, subverting closure and averting it, I think that's brilliant. And I understand why Jetman is popular among Sentai fans. Do I think it's my favorite installment in the Super Sentai series? No, I don't. It wasn't. Ranger did it better. Not that specific thing, but Ranger did 50 episodes better than Jetman did. I maintain that it stagnated far too soon and was far too difficult to watch. That's why this video is being made right now and not 5 months ago. It was so difficult to watch. But I don't know if I recommend watching all of it, but I recommend watching enough of it to appreciate that final sequence. And I recommend watching the episode of Gokaiger, episode 28 by the way, immediately after. And ultimately, look, I understand why it's good, and I appreciate it, and I think you should watch some of it, but you shouldn't watch all of it. Extending from that, you've got relationships internally with the club. It's because there's a thing going on in the media about football, so the word club came out. I didn't press record on the recorder, so I'm using onboard audio. You better have done a good job, camera. Where was I?